Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Last year, you learned something about Romanian illustration from our resident Maria Sordocan. You can find that recording and all other podcasts that we made on our Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, and YouTube. But today, we will be talking about Austrian illustration. And the talk will be given by an expert, right? Sonja Stangl. So please, it's all yours.
Sure, thank you. My name is Sonja Stangl, like you said. I've been working as a freelance illustrator for a bit more than 10 years now. And I work in a lot of different areas. So I work in publishing, animation, packaging, advertising, and character design. And I say that because it is like this for a lot of illustrators in Austria. Like, we work in a lot of different fields. Despite that, I'm gonna structure the following presentation a little bit in fields, because it's just easier to get along and see who does what great in what field. I have been involved and still am in some Austrian illustration organizations, like Austrian Illustration. I also represented Austria in the European Illustrators Forum. I organize events like the Illustration Days, so I have kind of an overview what's happening, I think, but this is still gonna be like a really kind of biased view of what I think is great and what I find amazing. So if you feel like, oh my God, she's missing such and such, I'm like, yeah, sorry, but it's my talk, so.
You can do whatever you want.
But yeah, I'm trying my best to give you a little bit of an overview. Little disclaimer also before, I was wondering when I was asked to do this, what does it mean, Austrian illustration? Because Vienna is very international, and I wasn't sure, does it mean that the person has to be born and raised in Austria? And I decided for me, no, because I don't care where people are born. So there will be people who have different origin, but do a lot of like their work and art and living in Austria. So I hope that's okay. In Austria, it's not always easy to get out of the shadow of this like illustrative and artistic past we have. I say that because it influences a lot of what we do, and also what you see, like on every corner, in every museum, everywhere there's like Klimt and Schiele, and you sometimes as an artist, you're in awe. You think you're kind of inspired and find it really cool, but it's also a little bit hard sometimes to get hurt, I think, with that history. So we have to shout over it sometimes. But it's getting better, I think, so I will talk a bit about that as well. But a lot of focus in Austria is still quite historical sometimes. And that's why I want to mention the first artist, André Breinbauer. He did a project together with the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna, and it's already been a few years back, but I think it's a really cool example of a combination of these old institutions and new artists, and they took like a necklace, which is from 1920, I think, made by Karl Otto Czeska. And you can go in the museum and then you can scan it and you can see the comic he made explaining the story, like what was the last moments this woman had before, like the last time she wore the necklace. And I think this is a really cool connection. And I also show you a bit more of André Breinbauer, because he's a really cool graphic novelist and comic artist. He did this graphic novel called Medusa und Perseus. So it's about the story of Medusa and Perseus, but you can read it from two sides. So on one side you have Medusa, and on the other side you have Perseus. And in the middle they meet, so it's a really interesting concept. And also, obviously, really beautifully illustrated. And he does a lot of his work still like analog on paper, and I think you can feel this texture-y vibe to it. Another one I want to mention in connection with graphic novels is Albert Mittringer. I really love his like super expressive lines. He's published a few graphic novels, and they're always like very dynamic and have a lot of energy. And you can also see that in his animations. Oh yeah, that works. Maybe I can show a little bit of, yeah, just so a tiny little movement. Yeah, I saw this the first time at the Best Austrian Animation Festival. And it's a story about like friendship and how they grew up and grow apart. And yeah, I think it's really well done. But it's 4 minutes long, so I just give you a quick, like a little intro. You can watch it on YouTube, but I think it really shows how you can make something move in a very nice way with a few simple lines. Okay. Oh yeah. Another one in animation who is really good at storytelling is Janina Putzka. This was actually a contracted work she did for the shortest day. Like the 21st of December is celebrated as a short film day because it's the shortest day of the year. And so you're encouraged to come together and organize short film viewings or go to short film viewings in your living room or the school or kindergarten or whatever. And she made a series of little videos promoting this, which are really funny and done in a cool way. And I love also the combination of hand-drawn lines and like actual potatoes. And you can also watch that on Vimeo. I really recommend it. One really big thing in Vienna especially is street art is the Danube canal. So we have this canal, Donau Canal, going through the city, and it's full of art. Like people sit there in the summer and have a drink and listen to music, and you can watch so much street art. It started kind of in the 80s, where the first wall was legalized. So you could have one legal wall, and then they made 3 more. So there's 4 now, but it's actually very small. The area that is legal, and people just started going over the boundaries, so to say. So now you have a few kilometers of street art, which is ever changing and really interesting. And I think it has shaped the community a lot because everyone can go there to practice, to see and to work on their craft. And now it's even they do street art river cruises. So you can go by boat and watch the art. And I think it's kind of funny to have this like, okay, the government accepted it, even though they went beyond the boundaries. They were like, okay, let's give them their space. And now they're even profiting from it with like tourism and stuff.
So does it still get bigger, or do people just paint over what's already there?
Mostly painting over, because the area that is sealed with concrete it just ran out of space. Like, and when you go outside, it becomes green, so there is no more walls. But the area that's there is kind of full and gets repainted every time. Yeah, so every time you go there, you find something new in a way. There's very little that has, like, it's only the ones that go down to the river that stay for longer, because obviously they're a bit more advanced too.
Yeah, they're not that approachable, accessible.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But yeah, I think it was really cool. Yeah. Nigels is one street artist I guess a lot of people know. Like, he's one of our biggest export, one of the biggest names. I just want to briefly mention him. This is also one of his pieces on the Danube Canal. And he's famous for these dissection pieces. But he's been talked about a lot, so I don't want to go into detail, even though there's a good reason he's been talked about a lot. But he's also shaped the community a lot with Rapid Eye Movement, which is like a space, a gallery, a hub for street artists in Vienna, which has, I think, supported a lot of young people who were practicing and getting good at street art. And he's also part of the Weird Crew. They're a collective of about 10 people from Austria and Germany. And I love it when they do like art together. You can totally see if you know which artist did what. And I use this example because I actually want to show you more about a street artist I really love, and it's the woman, you can see that's her style. It's Frau Isa, and she does this like really distinctive illustration or murals, always with women and always with the same elements, but still so different. So I really like them, and they have this kind of dreamy, almost nostalgic, melancholic vibe to them. So yeah, if you see them on a big wall, they make you happy in a way.
And is this mostly commissioned work, or do they have like a huge group of people who just help each other out? Because these are big.
Yeah, they're big. Yeah, no, now she's mostly commissioned, like a lot of the time by festivals. And in Vienna, when there is like, they put down a building and then there's this open wall where the building connected to the other. So often the building owner or the government, if it's government owned, will be like, okay, let's get some artists to do this. But yeah, it's a mixture. She also does ones that she just does because she wants to, but she is for a big part living now of street art. So yeah, she's also really interesting. Like she talks about that as well, the financial part. And yeah, it is possible, but yeah.
Limited maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and she also does illustration, like she did a kids book, so that's why I'm connecting the different areas again. Another illustrator I want to talk about is Peter Diamond. He's actually Canadian, but he's living in Austria for forever now. Like his family's there, and we feel we own him. Yeah. But he does really, really interesting stuff, and I love how he's so detailed. And he's mostly in alternative movie posters right now, which is also quite an interesting market, I think, which can also work. And he did this series for Cartoon Saloon, which is a really nice animation studio in Ireland, and they made alternative posters of these, and yeah, I think they're really well done. This was an interesting project the last 2 years, I think. It was actually initiated by a studio, like a game studio, which is called Cosa Creations. And they work together with Ellie Baum and Yves Tanner. They're a couple. And they work together and made these beautiful illustrations. They made a tarot set and an RGB game, like a whole set of multiple Kickstarters that were all successfully funded, which is also really cool that they managed to do that. And what I find really interesting with them is that they really work together. Like it's not, I made this picture and you made this picture. And you don't see that often in illustration, but they really like have a process where they create together. And what comes out is also really beautiful. So I find that really fascinating. So yeah. Yeah, one more because it's so beautiful. This is Tessa Sima, a very different style now, but not less amazing, I think. She started something called Einblattgeschichten. It's translated like one-page stories, and she started that in 2018 and continued. So every day she makes like a sentence or a little story and a little illustration, and she is not allowed to erase anything, and she has to post it, and she's also putting it onto walls or places somewhere in Vienna, like this kind of mixture between street art and illustration and also storytelling in a way. I find you really cute, and yeah, the limitation of not using an eraser and you have to show it is kind of interesting, I think, for illustrators as well, because we're always like, perfectionism has no space, and also you have to put it out there. You have no choice, like whatever happens. And I really like that.
Can you maybe translate one of those sentences on the previous slide?
The analphabetic, that's the same word, right? The person who's analphabetic read between the lines or not at all.
That's really cute. That works in English as well. How many of these do they have?
Lots, yeah.
Oh, please do one more.
Okay, the second is really hard with the words. So the undressed underpants is the third. Is going her way south. So yeah, she's traveling or it. And the middle one is a bit hard because it's about words of shouting. Like we use the word neck when someone is shouting and neck shouter, and someone who is picky with their money is also related. It's very German specific, so maybe it doesn't translate that well.
Really interesting, like using all these double entendres and puns, but still in one sentence. That must be quite difficult.
And yeah, every day on the spot. And I mean, I'm sure she's like mostly posting the best ones here. So like but she has all of them, and she posted all of them, but the selection, yeah. Yeah. I totally recommend checking her out. Like, she has a lot of it. She also does little scenes and stuff. She also made a book, which I'm quickly gonna show because it's also really funny. Meaning-wise, it's called like, what if I would wear responsibility as a hat? So what does it mean? Like, if I have a crown, does it make a difference? What if I want to take off responsibility for a day? And like, she has that in all her work, this kind of like really funny, meaningful in a way, playful content, and these like super simple, like in a really cool way, like on the spot illustrations. Yeah. And speaking of picture books, there's one more I want to show you, Raffaella Schöbitz. She did one, like, it was rewarded the most beautiful picture book in Austria. It's translated, You Are What Counts. And yeah, she's also really nice, like, little detaily stuff. And I'm gonna come to my last area or field of illustration. I'm using this because it shows kind of how we're still always influenced by the past. And this was actually a poster done by a game studio, Mipumi. And they did it for like a big games conference where they were showing the most beautiful video games in Austria. And I kind of wanted to add this because I feel a lot of the time video games is not really arrived in illustration yet. And I think it's a pity because there's like really beautiful, artful video games. And that's why I want to show you one studio in Vienna that did Old Man's Journey. They also have other really, really beautiful games. I just pick out this one because it's also like a heartwarming story, kind of sad and heartwarming story, and beautiful art. You can play it on iPad, and it has won over 17 international awards and got really big. Yeah, and that's the scenes in between. They're done by Lip Camarella. He's actually from northern Italy, but also lived and studied and spent a lot of time in Vienna. And now he's in LA, I think, so people come and go. One last project I want to mention now is a game that's going to come out soon. And I'm really curious about it, not just because I kind of worked a little bit on it. I only did a tiny, tiny part, concepts for the monsters, so I think it's okay to still push it without being ashamed because it was such a small part. And why would I? But it's set in the Austrian Alps, and they call it like slaycation. So it's like vacation in the places where you usually go in Austria, where they're so big in tourism. And you can go around and into dungeons and kind of slay monsters straight out of Austrian folklore. And then you go to the pub and talk with the people, and it's kind of like a bit stereotypical, but in a fun and nice way. And yeah, I think it's really cool. I'm really looking forward to see that connection also between new stuff and this old history. Yeah. So that was mostly for the artists I wanted to talk about, but I also want to mention a little bit, like, as illustrators, we have so much to do and so much to look for. Like, we're have to watch our taxes, we have to be our project managers, we have to be our marketing team. We are often like a whole company in one person, and that's really overwhelming sometimes. At least it was for me at the beginning. And when I moved to Vienna, like I come from the countryside of Austria, so I moved to Vienna and felt very isolated and confused. I did study multimedia art, so I had art people, but no one did illustration specifically. Mm-hmm. And I think it's different because illustration has so many extra parts, so I felt quite overwhelmed. And what really was important for me is finding networks and communities. So I want to also show a little bit what is happening in that area in Austria. This is just like a quick overview of some things that are happening. There's definitely a lot more. I'm probably forgetting some, but like I said, I can only talk about the ones that are really near and dear to me. Which might be interesting for international people is probably Carbon Black. It's in Graz, a small, beautiful town in Austria, and they also have like workshops with really cool artists, like internationally. And Pixel Vienna is a conference. Next Comic is in Linz. It's a little comic festival. And Austrian Illustration, Illustria are the organizations. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. And the others are mostly like meetups or like where you meet on a regular basis, which I think is also really important. Calle Libre, I'm going to show you quickly now because it's another beautiful example how we cannot let go of the past in every design. It's beautiful, I love it, but it's funny to see how much we incorporate it. And anyway, it's a street art festival. They also do a lot along the Danube canal. And it started 10 years ago as like a tiny festival, and now it's the biggest street art festival in Central Europe. So they've really grown, they do workshops, they invite artists to paint the walls live there so you can watch it and ask questions if they're not somewhere high up at the moment. Yeah, I think it's really cool to check out if you're into that. And Austrian Illustration, it's kind of a young ILO organization we have, which is basically just a bunch of illustrators trying to make something happen, working for free. But I think it's really interesting how it has developed, as in we have these different meetups from all kinds of like comics, and then there is a motion design, like an animation meetup, an illustration meetup, and so many of them. And Austrian Illustration has kind of brought them together, and with the event as well, like Illustration Day, there is, I don't know, merch tables, you have presentations, you have live drawing. There's so much different stuff going on in one event, and I think that was really interesting and important. And also Illutisch is like a monthly meetup, which has also really grown over the years. You can see when I went there like 10 years ago, we were, I don't know, like 5 people. And now there's so many people and so many like young people also there. So I think you can really tell how that, like these things are starting to reach and to become a lot more like also intergenerational. Like it's not always like these few old people that have been there. And yeah, I also met a few people there, which I'm sharing a studio with now for almost 6 years. So it's kind of like creating this, like finding a family is sometimes really good at these events. And yeah, we also have a Discord server, which I just quickly want to mention because it's so good for the community. Because you can just, if I need a quote and I don't know what to charge, or there's so many things we all know are new, like when you start out that you're overwhelmed with. And I think this is really important, and that's why I'm mentioning this. It's probably not just Austria specific, but yeah, I think it's important for all of us to also find this, like to communicate more and to share all our knowledge and make this community happen.
But it all happens on like volunteer basis, I suppose. It's really like a community Trying to help each other.
Yeah, it's all volunteer-based. For the events, like you apply for funding from the state, like that we have a little bit. But yeah, it's the work.
I mean, just taking care of a Discord is a lot of work.
Oh yeah. That's true. But you can really feel how it changes. Like it's really valuable in a way that a lot of the times we have pressure from clients. I think you have this like, oh, I'm also talking with another illustrator who's going to do it cheaper, and then you're like, so is the person really?
So you can gossip about clients.
Yeah,
on the Discord.
or you can make sure that you have realistic prices, which is often a really big problem in illustration, which I'm going to quickly make. Oh yeah, that's just a exhibition we also made last year because we figured that there is no illustration exhibition in Vienna. I don't know why, but it's a big city, but there was none. It was always like in connection with other events, but no specific exhibition just for illustrators. So we made that and that's how it works. Like it was an old building owned by the Vienna Water organization. They do the water, and if you do something for the topic of water, you can have the space for free.
Okay, that's
so you kind of find your way of like, okay, straightforward, but then you can make it happen, even if it's not so easy to do when everyone is working volunteering. And yeah, and speaking of funding or of prices and talking about that in general, there is Illustration Ladies, which started a few years ago only as a drawing group actually. So they were meeting up and drawing and just talking about stuff, and it really turned out that Austria still, we knew that statistically before, Austria still has a bit of a gender pay gap problem, despite being considered quite forward, but even in the European statistics we were quite bad. And so that really crystallized in these meetings, and it was really good to have this exchange and talk about it more. And now they have grown, like they make international meetups. They also started becoming something like an agency now, which I find really interesting, to even promote this more, like help with negotiation, get more into the client communication. And so it's a mixture between subscription and a percentage for an agency, which is quite a concept I haven't seen before in that way. And I'm really curious where it's going. I think they're trying to find a way where they can like really help illustrators and still sustain their own living.
Still exist.
So because you have to, I mean, they have done it for free for a few years as well, and then you find a way. But I think it's really interesting, and I'm curious how it's going. Yeah, and that's kind of the slide I want to end on. It's an illustration by another brilliant illustrator. I cannot show all of them, that's why I had to limit it a little bit. But I think that really describes also where all these organizations are going, and where I think, which is important to consider. We use this also as a visual for something called Money Talks, where we're trying to really openly talk about money. I think in a panel discussion, and also where people can ask direct questions straight away, because I think it's so important to have this conversation openly. And also take care of like mental health and stuff, because we love looking at each other's illustrations, and that's beautiful and really inspiring, but how much do we look at each other's struggles and kind of support each other in that way? And yeah, I think that's something that's really changed within the last 10 years that I'm in illustration, that I feel that it's really growing a lot more, the supportiveness and the looking at that kind of stuff. Like when I started, it was not that big a topic to talk about mental health, and I feel like that's happening way more now. And yeah, I think that's really good. And I don't have a solution to all of that, but I think it's important to talk about it. And yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was it. Thank
that was
you.
beautiful. Thank you. There's so much Instagram accounts now I want to follow.
Yeah.
I have a few questions that I thought of listening to you. And one of them is, Austria is fairly small. Mm-hmm. Do you think it influences what is being created in your country in a way that kind of you can see? Because when I look at what's being created in Czech Republic, I see that we are a bit limited with the resources, but we are limited in a different way. Czech language is used much less, and you don't have this limitation.
No, I mean, we have the German-speaking market, which is kind of handy when it comes to publishing. So it's not always, I have to break this down, I think, in areas, because when it comes to book publishing, we technically have the German-speaking market because you don't have to translate books, but it's still not that it automatically goes onto that market. You still have to push, like some books, especially if you do a bit niche stuff, it's only going to be in the Austrian market, which is tiny. Like that's probably the same as in Czech, that you have like a few thousand books of something, and
so the distribution doesn't really translate.
No, you still have to get German distributors, and you still have to fight for that. I think in a similar way, but maybe it's a bit easier because they don't have to translate.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to other things, I think it's quite open in that way that you look what's happening international, and there is international events happening. Like Vienna is, even though Austria is small, kind of an international city where there's people coming, you have workshops, you have influence from outside as well. So I think I don't really see it that much anymore as a limitation, because we are all online now anyway and get influenced by all things as well. Yeah.
Talking about influences, you showed us some of the, the old masters of illustration and how you see their work reflected in the work of your colleagues. Does it reflect in yours?
Oh, good question.
And if it does, do you fight it?
Yeah. I'm not 100% aware of it, I think. I'm pretty sure it does. I'm pretty sure it does because you see it everywhere. And I know, for example, I stop at every Art Nouveau building in Vienna and take pictures. So I've still, even though it's annoying sometimes to have it so much on your nose all the time, it's still beautiful and you still want to take it with you.
The building,
the building, yeah. But I think mostly, I guess a little bit in the playfulness, you might say it reflects in my work as well. But I wasn't so much, I have to think about that more. It's a good question.
Yeah. And last thing I wanted to ask is more comics related. I could see in the past 2 decades here in Czech Republic, we had this huge wave of mostly doing historical stuff. And there was, it started very educational. It might have been a bit too boring, to be honest, but then it developed into something more interesting. But it was definitively a huge trend. Is there something like that, a trend in what kind of stories are being told?
I think recently the trend is a lot about self-reflective stories, I think, mostly. The feeling, there was a big one recently about how you feel in your body, about being fat, or about a lot of that comes more, I think. What I've seen the last year is that the same as mental health is becoming a bigger topic, and I think that happens in graphic novels as well. The history part, I think it's always there. Yeah, it's something we all. I think everything you make, in general, it's something somehow connected to your past and who you are. And in comics, I think that's most apparent because a lot of the time you tell your own story or something that has influenced you in a way. So history is a big part of us, so I totally get that's happening as well. And,
we've talked a bit about Austrian author Ulle Lust. She is creating autobiographical comics, and it's a lot about her inner workings, but it's also just like retelling her past. Do you think this interest in the inner workings is connected to autobiographies? Do you think it's kind of the same genre, or is the inner workings more of on the educational side?
No, I think if you talk about inner working, it has to be. No, I'm not saying it has to be, but I think it's important that it is biographic, because it feels wrong to say like, oh, your inner workings have to be like this, but I don't know what I'm talking about. So I think it's connected. It might not be so apparent sometimes, but the ones I know from Regina Hofer, I think was the one about the body that came out. Yeah, it has to be from your own perspective and from your own story. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please direct them at me. So one of the biggest topics lately in Czech Republic is the status of the artist or of the author, meaning that there would be a legal label in the eyes of the state of what the illustrator is or what he or she does. That means that it would be a bit easier to do taxes or to ask for grants, and it would just mean that you actually have something to call yourself. You wouldn't be just a business person, which you are now when you're working freelance. So is there something like that in Austria?
Okay, you mean you have like a label as you're an artist officially?
Yes.
Okay. We have different, like if it comes to legal status, we have businesses, which is like if I open a business, and we have free, like it's called new self-employed people translated.
All right.
But it's something where freelancers like writers and illustrators often fall under. It does not make that much of a difference in a way, only that you're not part of the commercial chamber, so you pay a little bit less for that. And you are eligible for artist insurance support. So you can apply if you send your portfolio and your work and you are within the range of what you're allowed to earn in that conditions. You can get money back on what you pay insurance, so that's a bit of a support. But yeah, it's good, and most people are, but you have to, for example, if I do graphic design, I would also already not be allowed to do it. So it's kind of this line where we often go through. But I think it's good that there is a differentiation between being a company and being an artist, yeah.
Because right now, it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer working freelance, or if you're a translator working freelance, or if you're an illustrator, you will always have the same conditions.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes it a bit hard to compare these professions, which are very different, especially what and how much you earn.
And they're trying to make a difference in you pay less taxes, or what's
yeah, maybe, but to be honest, it would. Right now it looks a bit more symbolic, but at least you would have the label, and maybe you could do like something different with that. So do you have this status?
Yeah, I think it's similar to that. Like, yeah, that you have this freelance. It's mostly in art areas, like like writers have it, or if I'm a theater actor or something, I would also fall under that. Like for most creative.
And in your opinion, was it advantageous for you?
Maybe it's similar. Like, yes, in that way that you pay less insurance. In that way, that's advantage because it just helps from the beginning. But in the reality of everyday life, apart from that, like no one asks me about my status in that way. Like it's not that big a thing. It's only a little financial help, I think. Yeah.
All right. So you've mentioned a lot that a lot of these organizations are volunteer-based. So it seems actually really nice that the community is kind of like trying to build each other up. Are there any upcoming events that maybe we could invite our listeners to?
Yes, most of it is going to be in autumn.
That's when everything is
when everything
illustration and comics related.
That's
especially
true. I mean, you can go to Calle Libre, to the street art festival, which is going to be in August, usually end of July, beginning of August. That's going to be a summer one. And the next illustration day is planned to be in November, but the day is not really 100% fixed.
Do you yourself take part on the organizing side, or?
In Austrian illustration, I do sometimes, like the illustration day, not so much, but I do like the money talks, I do the niche things that are about mental health and money, because that's kind of like
that's your focus.
Where I feel strong about. So it's a loose group of people, and you can see it changes also since everyone is working volunteering there. Someone has a lot of energy for 1 year, and the next year he or she might be okay, we need to do more of my own stuff now. So it's never like a fixed team, and I think that's how it is if you do work for free. I guess you have only so much capacity, and then
you have to work with the resources.
Exactly.
Well, Sonja, this was really, really impressive. Thank you very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
And if you want to hear more about illustration, and if you want to listen to the podcast that we recorded with our with the other artists, then please visit our YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and our website www.symposiumillustrace.cz. Thank you very much.